The Nassau Grouper, iconic fish of the Caribbean, but a fish at risk. You're about to go on a multi-year adventure to discover how this creature became endangered. You'll also find out how scientists are working with the Cayman Islands Department of Environment to bring it back from the brink.
We're just trying to get more fish on the reef for everyone. Divers to see, fishermen to catch.
This is really a model for how governments throughout the Caribbean should do fisheries management.
We'll also reveal how a night in shining scuba gear may help get the word out about saving this friendly fish in other parts of the Caribbean as well.
My immediate reaction was to say that this was one of the sort of 20 wonders of the world, and I really think it is one of the 20 wonders of the world.
The clock is running and it's time to dive in. Grouper Moon, the next phase, a Harvey Expedition, starts right now.
Good morning. How are you? How are you? Good to see you.
It's not every day a fish gets support from a night.
My daughter Jessica? Yeah, of course. Nice to see you again.
That night is Sir Richard Branson, one of the world's most popular businessmen and a highly accomplished entrepreneur. He's also a friend to animals around the globe. Sir Richard Branson owns an island in the BVI and has come to Little Cayman in the Cayman Islands to discover the story of the Nassau Grouper. Diving with Sir Richard on this expedition is his daughter Holly. Throughout the Caribbean, Nassau Groupers are iconic because of their striking colour pattern, and they are also a popular Caribbean dish. They were heavily targeted because of an evolutionary trait. To spawn, they come together all in one location. With all of the adult fish in one spot, they are extremely easy to target.
So it was actually a lot of the older fishermen that came to us way back in '86 to say that they were noticing something happening with the spawnings, with the fishing population. Because they used to fish the sites, during the winter full moons. And they said, over the last couple of years, we've been catching fewer fish, and the fish that we do catch have been smaller. So they asked us to help them figure out what was going on. And that's when the DOE started monitoring the catch that came in.
In 2001 and 2002, this aggregation was heavily targeted.
2001, we only found out about it when they brought the fish to sell in Grand, after they'd been sold in Little and Brack, and they couldn't sell it. So they packed up the fish that they couldn't sell, brought it to Grand, and that's where the pictures that you see of the fish on the shore in Hogstay Bay, that was 2001. Second catch was in 2002, and it was during that second catch that REEF and DOE were actually there in the water monitoring when they were fishing.
Staggered by the gross waste of a living resource, the Cayman Islands Department of Environment enacted an 8-year fishing ban on all known aggregation sites throughout the Cayman Islands. And REEF, or the Reef Environmental Education Foundation, dove in to find out the facts and what they could do to help.
That's an amazing resource. There is no place out there in the Caribbean, or really in the world, with as easy access to a world-class aggregation as here in Little Cayman. I mean, we're a 5 to 10 minute boat ride from the largest known aggregation for this species anywhere. The value of a long monitoring program where you get information over not just a few years, but over a generation or more of a population, that type of information is really valuable because it allows you to look at how a population recovers as it responds to management actions.
You jump forward, of course, to what really happened from a historic perspective in 2016 was the major new conservation legislation enacted. And that was really, I think, a really amazing thing, in part because they really incorporated a lot of the information that we generated into making decisions on how, where, and when the species should be managed.
We have size limits on Nassau Grouper, we have possession restrictions, we have a lot more ability to protect these fish when it's critical, when they're at the spawning site. So the closed season for Nassau Grouper runs from the 1st of December through 30th of April. The open season catch limit is 5 Nassau Grouper per person or 5 per boat per day, whichever is less. There's a size limit on Nassau Grouper of between 16 and 24 inches inclusive.
It's going to take a while to prove that that policy will work. that really, in fact, you've created a system here. And this is true for all fisheries, right? If you don't over-harvest something, you have this magnificent perpetual motion machine, right? But it takes some willpower to keep harvest rates under control and at sustainable levels.
We've been very lucky to be able to perpetuate this program year over year and in fact expand it and collect more information through time by starting to ask new and more interesting questions as we build on our knowledge base.
Can special attention help bring these fish back right across the Caribbean? That's what we're here to find out. The Cayman Islands are located south of Cuba, and there are 3 islands: Grand Cayman, Cayman Brac, and Little Cayman. I've made my home here on Grand Cayman for many years. If you've ever been to Grand Cayman, chances are you know the incredible beauty of the island, as well as Stingray City. Stingray City is the #1 dive site in the world and home to friendly southern stingrays eager for a meal. When it comes to scuba diving, the Cayman Islands is one of the top destinations in the world to immerse yourself. You're surrounded by amazing fish, including the always curious Nassau Grouper. For an artist, it's perfect, and I'm honored to call the Cayman Islands my home. When I first discovered the plight of the Nassau Groupers, I knew I had to find out more. I traveled to Little Cayman and met with the hardworking husband and wife team of Doctors Bryce and Christy Simmons.
When this site out here on the west end of Little Cayman was discovered, the government was, ready to go into action immediately, start to collect that preliminary information to say, yes, in fact, this is a huge aggregation and constitutes the largest known aggregation, not only in the Caymans, but anywhere in the Caribbean. And then the Marine Conservation Board came in and established short-term protections and then longer-term protections, allowing us to do the science necessary to build up information for the Cayman Islands government to ultimately legislate a set of rules that are maximally able to preserve and rebuild the stock of fishes. So you can't ask for a better approach to governing a resource.
Really the key is to being able to understand what's going on and predict, well, this could be happening, so well, let's look at this and let's tweak this, and just being able to have all those minds involved with it is really what I think strengthened it and was able to create the success story that we have now.
But a happy ending is still in question. Just ahead, we'll look at how the science continues and how the population is today, plus more on Sir Richard Branson's mission and how another man-made problem may impact the fish in a much larger way. That's all coming up next on Grouper Moon: The Next Phase, a Guy Harvey expedition. Welcome back to Grouper Moon: The Next Phase, a Guy Harvey expedition. We've been exploring the story of the Nassau Grouper, a Caribbean icon, and how it was almost wiped out due to overfishing. The reason? The fish were hit really heavily when they came together to spawn once a year, taking out the spawning adults and future offspring. Through dedicated research by scientists like Bryce and Christy at REEF, the Cayman Islands Department of Environment, and many concerned citizens, the fish were protected. Now, the groupers are making a comeback, and the aggregation is growing in size.
We're working on getting numbers every year on population levels, and we just finished this year tagging the fish and are now starting to do our repetitive counts, where we do a whole series of counts for the next couple days to try to get a very accurate number of the total population of fish out at that spawning site.
Here are some fast facts about Nassau Grouper. It takes a Nassau Grouper 5 to 7 years to reach reproductive maturity. It's estimated they can live for more than 12 years depending on fishing pressure, and the oldest Nassau Grouper caught in the wild was 29 years of age. They can weigh as much as 55 pounds. The Nassau Grouper is a critically important apex predator on Caribbean reefs. They spawn during the winter months in the Cayman Islands a few days after a full moon by gathering all together in a spawning aggregation. Fishing at spawning aggregation sites made up to 90% of the annual commercial landings. Today, the waters around the island of Little Cayman represent a huge success story.
We're standing right now 8 miles from probably the biggest, healthiest spawning aggregation for Nassau Grouper in the Caribbean. It's going to take time, even when you put in those regulations to see results.
Another important aspect of this research is the recruitment of juveniles. The small fish we photographed several years ago are now part of the aggregation. The offspring from each spawn do come back to Little Cayman. Remove them and you remove the building blocks of the species at this location.
In 2012, we did see a lot of young baby Nassau Grouper all around the island of Little Cayman and other places around the Caribbean. And we have been eagerly waiting this year because we knew that those young ones were going to finally be ready to start coming out to the aggregation, and they definitely are.
We only have really big fish. That would indicate that no new fish are coming in and recruiting. But if we're getting a good representative sample of all the fish out there with those lasers, what we would expect to see is continue to see big fish because they're fairly well protected now, but more new fish becoming a big part of the population. And that helps us document not only have we protected what's there, but we're protecting what's continuing to come in.
The protections in place and the success of this conservation effort is why Sir Richard Branson is here.
The wonderful thing about what you're doing is you're not saying fishermen can't fish and the only way forward is to ban all fishing. What you're saying is let's come up with an imaginative way of making sure there are many more fish so that fishermen can have a livelihood, but that fish stock can continue for centuries to come.
His team wants to understand if the same methods can be applied elsewhere in the Caribbean to help bring back Nassau groupers throughout their range.
Every government would welcome it. The BVI in particular would welcome it.
That process of having people like Richard Branson show up and be with us and see the magical thing that is the Nassau Grouper spawning aggregation site, but also help to get the word out about the work that we're doing here, that's critical.
And if we can continue to create conservation legislation in different islands, maybe we can rebuild those networks. And so Nassau Grouper, not just on the Cayman Islands, but throughout the Caribbean, can be restored to the levels that they are hopefully going to get to here.
Coming up next, we'll look at the difficulty of getting to the Nassau Grouper aggregation. Plus, here they come. In a moment, witness the migration to the spawning site, something that surprised us all. Grouper Moon, the next phase, will continue in just a moment. Welcome back to Grouper Moon, the next phase. We're investigating the life history of the Nassau Grouper and how they became endangered across the Caribbean. Historically, the fish were always hit hard because they came together every year in the same place after the full moon. This year, I'm witnessing migration to the spawning site, something that surprised us all. We went for an afternoon dive with Mike and the dive team from Southern Cross Club and told them we wanted to see the run of Nassau groupers along the reef. We'd never seen it. We'd always spent time at the site itself. So he organized a drift dive for us. I was filming my daughter, Jessica, with a hawksbill turtle. And then suddenly, here they come. And I was so surprised to see it. It was like a tidal wave of bodies. They were so focused. They knew exactly what they wanted to do, where they had to go, and they were racing along the reef at a pretty rapid pace in a strung out group. It was just like, wow, we couldn't have struck it better. We thought we were too late to see the movement of animals. All the dive tour operators report how fantastic it is to see these big Nassau groupers marching past, hundreds of fish at a time, and so we finally got to experience that for ourselves. The thing was that all these fish were the new adults. They were not big fish. They were all around 7 to 8 pounds. And so it was their first time to spawn, and I think they were a little late to the party, but they were catching up. And then I floated there in silent wonder as the fish made their way along the reef. How impressive is it in nature that all these fish know where they're going and when they're going to get there? Seeing the spawning isn't always easy. There can be currents, and it happens in deep water right after sunset. When this year's fireworks went off, we were impressed as always. Well, that was pretty cool. We just came up from our last dive on the spawning site with probably 5,000 or 6,000 Nassau groupers all spawning. But for the first time we've ever been able to record it, they drifted off the edge and into the blue. And that means the whole group of fish becomes much tighter in a ball, and they're really going on a bit like a bait ball, really.
They were well off the wall this time around. Normally the last couple of dives they've been on the wall, hugging close to the bottom, and it was just incredible. Absolutely mind-blowing.
It's amazing nature. Every time you see it, it's different, and you wonder what drives them to that kind of behavior.
Yeah,
but the current was very slack tonight. The drifters are barely moving at all. And an ideal condition for us who are pretty poor swimmers to actually keep up with the ball drifting. Seen it before, but never been able to keep up with it because it just goes into the blue.
Right.
And in the dark you lose sight of the edge and it gets kind of leery out there.
These are drifters that have a satellite connector at the top there in the buoy, and we'll put them out right up over the top of where the spawning was occurring. And once the paper will come loose and the big sock will come out, and those drifters will go on, presumably with the spawn cloud as they go off into the ocean. And we're using this to help us track, better understand where the little baby Nassau grouper end up after their journey in the ocean for about 45 days.
It's definitely in the top 20 wonders of the world. It's beautiful.
For a man who has seen almost everything, witnessing the grouper spawn had a huge impact on Sir Richard Branson as well.
I really do think it's one of the great wonders. I mean, it's, you know, there are a few treats in the world quite like it, and it should be. It's one of those ones that should be treasured everywhere it takes place.
Coming up next, we look at a new twist in the research, the effort underway to actually watch as eggs travel in the open ocean. Plus, we'll find out why massive changes to the world's seas may continue to put the Nassau grouper and other fish in danger. Grouper Moon, the next phase, continues in just a moment. Welcome back to Grouper Moon, the next phase. We're investigating the life history of the Nassau grouper and how a dedicated team of scientists helped bring this fish back from the brink in Little Cayman. We watched in wonder as a larger aggregation spawned, joined by the next generation of adult fish ready to reproduce. Which brings us to the next part of the study. You're looking at an underwater camera that will be used to watch the eggs as they travel in the open ocean. There are many elements impacting the fish. The period of time the larvae swim in the plankton lasts for 30 to 40 days. The question is, does warmer water force the Nassau grouper larvae to use up the nutrients in its yolk sac sooner, leading to problems in its development? This is not just a bag of water, it's a bag of eggs and sperm from Nassau grouper just spawned. We're going to take them over to CCMI and get some early life history studies going right now.
To have the CCMI lab facilities on Little Cayman so that ourselves, DOE and REEF, could actually take some of the larval work that we were working on and try things there immediately, you know, when we were there in the field, was a tremendous resource and a great facility to have there for us.
We're seeing that the grouper embryos are very sensitive to warm water temperatures. I was surprised to see that there's a response even at 29 degrees Celsius, which is really only 2 degrees warmer than what we have already today. So it's not that unlikely to happen in the near future here. The 31-degree temperatures has very low survival even at hatch. What comes in question then is that embryos of certain females may be more likely to survive warmer temperatures, so you'll look into some sort of adaptability, hopefully, as the temperatures warm gradually.
And so that's the next part of this story, and it will continue to develop over time. It's been an incredible period of time since we started this work. The dedicated scientists have become my very good friends. And now seeing someone like Sir Richard Branson work to export the success of this story back to the BVI and perhaps other places inspires me as well.
The BVI in particular would welcome it because You know, I haven't seen a grouper in the BVI for years. If we can find where groupers spawned over the last few centuries from the fishermen, which the government are now trying to do, and if we can start protecting those areas, and if we can start seeing the numbers coming back like they have in the Cayman, it'll be just wonderful news for local fishermen as well.
So the monitoring that follows the research, absolutely critical here. In other places, there's still a lot of research to do, a lot of active management to do if we want to restore these populations of Nassau grouper and other species.
It's been a story of science and conservation working, of making the right decision for the long term.
You know, from the early days when I was one of those that used to go and monitor the catches coming in at the different sites, to now have the protections in place, go from diving on the spag sites to in the initial stages to now seeing the protections. All the work that's been done it's extremely rewarding to see that and know that I've been a part of it. It's fantastic, tremendous.
So the next phase of the Nassau Grouper story begins. What happens next is still up to all of us. It is our collective responsibility to conserve the marine environment and to maintain the biodiversity of this planet. I'm Guy Harvey, and I'll see you on the next expedition.